Hello there guys, what is going on? Daniel Childs back here again for another show. Now, we are celebrating Christmas, but Chelsea, as we know each year, Premier League fixtures continue to go on. And we've got over the annoyance of a Christmas Eve fixture, but luckily no Boxing Day fixture this year. On the 27th, Chelsea are at home to Crystal Palace in the Premier League. I'm very glad to say I've been joined by a great Palace commentator, comedian Jim Daly, who is part of the 5-Year Plan podcast. And Jim, how are you doing?
I'm very good, Daniel. Good to talk to you. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you as well. Hopefully not too much of a Merry Christmas for Crystal Palace, but at Stamford Bridge, but definitely share the Christmas festivities. I think the best place to start, it was interesting, and full disclosure, people, not that surprising, we are recording this in advance of Christmas because, as you could probably imagine, we're all quite busy over the Christmas period. And
although you've gone for a Christmassy background, loving the tree. I'm less Christmassy. This is my daughter's bedroom, hence not my bedroom. Just want to point out, hence the rainbows. So you've made more of an effort than I have in terms of Christmas.
Yeah, but it is still cheery. You can get away. Yeah, it's still cheery. And to be honest, with Chelsea, I'm kind of, the cheery background doesn't quite reflect Chelsea at the current point. So I'm trying to sort of comfort myself with what's going on. I think the best place to start is, it was interesting watching the Brighton game. And seeing a game that Crystal Palace could have won that game at least 2-0. And just seeing how that structure and that defensive approach that Roy Hodgson has been so famed for looks to still be very effective in the Premier League. Of course, another really good result at the Etihad. How has life been under Roy Hodgson this time around? Especially he came in last season. There was a lot of kind of controversy and backlash to, at least from outsiders, to Vieira being sacked. But is life good? Is life bad? How do you find it with Hodgson once again in the dugout at Selhurst Park?
Well, full disclosure, I'm a huge Roy Hodgson fan and have been for a long time, even before he joined Palace, really. Thought he got a bit of a rough time at England and Liverpool, but pretty much done well everywhere that's a sort of Palace-like club, Fulham and West Brom, and obviously great on the continent, and my earbud's fallen out, which is again like Palace, isn't it? So it looks like a good start, but it unravels after a few seconds. I will say that Brighton game, it's the 5th season in a row that Brighton Palace at Selhurst has finished 1-1. So I think we could have all just not played the game. We could have all just taken the 1-1 and gone home. I really think that was a waste of everyone's time. You're right, though. I think from the outside in, it's pretty clear to see how Roy approaches games. He's talked very openly about that. And when he came back in April, was it this year, after a year and a half of Vieira trying a different approach, I think we all knew exactly what was going to happen, which was back to basics and back to sort of 2 banks of 4. And Palace needed that, really, because they were sort of sliding off a cliff, really. I'm going to give up on this earpiece. Let's try the other one. Hopefully that one works as well. This is Christmas, guys. But I think the thing with Roy is you kind of compromise. You compromise safety in the Premier League and going through a season, and it's the first, when he was back this year and really in the previous few seasons before he left, it's the first time I've ever really felt quite confident as a Palace fan, or at least not scared of getting relegated. And I've been supporting Palace for a long time, and every other season I've been in the Premier League, we've just almost accepted a relegation fight. So I think, but with that, you're gonna compromise or trade that off against maybe less attractive football. But no other manager has kept us in the Premier League as many years as Roy has. I think he will this year, even though we've had a bit of a tough run, and obviously coming into the fixture of you guys it's been a nightmare couple of runs of fixtures. But as you said, the draws against Brighton and City, I think, prove that if we're in games, we can get points. So look, it's not the sexiest football in the world, and for a year under Vieira, it was fantastic. But we've seen so many teams try and do that, and it's not worked out, and they've got relegated. At least with Palace, they sort of know when to pull the trigger and when to go back to basics. And every time we do that, and it happened after De Boer with Allardyce, after Pardew after Pardew with Allardyce, I apologise, and then after Frank De Boer with Roy, every time we go back to basics, we do stay up. So who knows what the future holds for Roy? But and you're right, there was controversy when Vieira left, and because people liked the direction that was going, but it wasn't working. And you have to look at, and maybe we'll come on to Eberechi Eze in a bit, but he was floundering under Vieira. Wasn't really getting game time. When he was, he looked like a sort of a lost little boy. Roy came in, and literally 2 weeks later, he's the archetype of the 5-1 win at Leeds. So he can get the best out of players, whether it be them young or old. He's well loved at Palace. He's not the future, but for now, I think he's doing a good job.
Yeah, I do wonder if whether it's, and of course you'll speak to this better than I can, whether it's a cultural thing with certain clubs, kind of the nature and the identity of Crystal Palace is very much of a counter-attack, especially in the Premier League over the last decade. Like, counter-attacking team, some really good attackers who can hurt a majority of Premier League defences, but that kind of is the identity. Or it's maybe just the very harsh, brutal reality of finances within the Premier League. I know Steve Parish has given extensive interviews about this, in terms of it's very difficult to try and go to that next level. As much as there's good infrastructure around the club, I think it's a curious one, because I appreciated what Vieira was doing, but I guess it's always that panic moment, isn't there, where you think, are we actually just going in reverse here, and are we actually falling into kind of a nice philosophy, but results aren't going to go anywhere, and financially we're going to be left in a very bad situation. So as a fan, is that something that maybe Palace fans are having to come to terms with, of that maybe harsh reality, despite kind of the hope of more progressive football in the future?
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think it depends on what fans you talk to. I think younger fans who have only known Palace in the Premier League are itching for us to do a Brighton, to bounce up the table and try and get into Europe. And I understand that. And I think that's fair to think that, when the context of your football supporting fandom is only Premier League, then that's fair to think that. I'm slightly older, and I've watched Palace get relegated many times and go into administration twice, nearly out of business. So for me, the context really is, firstly, great to have a club, secondly, just staying in the Premier League. Because for a team like Palace, staying in the Premier League, the financial rewards for that are huge, and that can create a legacy down the line. They've already built this £20 million academy over the road from the training ground, which is now starting to produce players like David Ozo, who came off the bench against City and against Brighton and played very well in both games. And they're looking at redoing the main stand, which was built in 1924, so it's long overdue an upgrade. And that in itself will almost make Selhurst sort of self-sufficient. So these are the legacies, really, of teams like us in the Premier League. Our legacy isn't really trophies. Leicester ruined that 7 years ago, whenever it was, because no team like us will ever do that again, because the big clubs all responded as expected. So our legacy really is players coming through that we then sell on for lots of money, a nicer stadium we can be proud of, staying in the Premier League. This is the best ever run we've ever had as a club in 100 and, well, it depends what fans you talk to. It's either 112 years or 164 years, depending whether you think we're created in 1905 or 1861. And that, to be honest, is it for Palace. Yes, we look at Brighton, and I'm not afraid to say that we're incredibly jealous of what Brighton are doing. Their recruitment's fantastic. They've got a brilliant manager, sort of manager we would want, a young, energetic, forward-thinking manager who clearly is good enough to be in the Premier League. They're in Europe. I mean, I would love to be. I mean, I couldn't afford it, but I'd love to be going to Marseille on a Thursday night and watching Palace all over Europe. I mean, it's what we all dream of. We had 2 games in the Intertoto Cup in 1998, and that was it. We lost both 2-0. Never even scored a goal in Europe. So, it can be done, but it also, the flip side of that is Brighton are bankrolled by a billionaire who I think has put something like a lot of that. I'm not a financial person, but a lot of that alone, his own assets against the club. You might want to take that out if I got that wrong. I don't want to libel him. But point being, this guy's got a lot of money, and it's difficult for clubs like us, unless you're going to be bought out by an oil baron, which brings its own moral dilemmas. I know Newcastle fans are wrestling with that. Then really you are kind of stuck in that purgatory. But I'm happy in the purgatory, to be honest, at the moment. And I'd rather be there than down in the hell that is the Championship.
Yeah, and talking about some of those good players that have been developed, I mean, even though he didn't come through your academy, Chelsea were seemingly, it felt like, close to signing Michael Elise in the summer, a player who I've enjoyed watching from his time at Reading and then seeing how he's developed at Crystal Palace. Keeping him, I mean, at least for one more season, of course, was really impressive. I know he signed that long-term deal. What are your opinions on him? Because it kind of feels like a lot of people talk about now, of course, Zaha's moved on, for years and years it was like, what's going to happen to Palace when Zaha leaves? But now it seems like the transition has been pretty smooth, because now you've got Eze, you've invested in recent years, and now of course Michael Elise. These are two very exciting young players who feel like they very much can take up that responsibility, and also hopefully raise a lot of funds in transfer fees, I'm sure, in the coming years.
Absolutely, and that's why clubs like us need to I've had to say tie these players down. I don't mean that. Reward them with these big contracts so that we can secure release clauses that make it worth our while. I think Elise and Eze are probably two of the most talented players I've ever seen at Crystal Palace. Some of the things they can do on the ball are absolutely unreal, and they're both an absolute joy to watch. And really, as fans, we know under Roy it's going to be more defensive, but you go to be entertained. And we've missed both through injury this season, but when they have been there, I mean, Eze at home to Everton in the first half, one of the best performances we've seen in the Palace shirt, and Elise just has these sparks. And even away at Luton a few weeks ago, we weren't that bad. We were pretty sort of blunt going forward. But Elise scores goal of the season. I mean, we lose 2-1, so everyone's going to forget about it. But an unbelievable individual goal, taking it almost from his own half and bending it in the top corner. So these are the things that those players can do. And really, down the years of Palace, you don't see many players like that. To be honest, I can probably count on one hand. Attilio Lombardo was excellent. Matt Jansen was great. They both weren't there very long. Both Eze and Elise have outlasted those players already. And I wouldn't be surprised if at least one of them goes at the end of the year. We've got other players like Gallagher as well, who I know we'll come on to. And we are lucky at the moment to have a really good crop of young players. And I think actually, going back to Wilf, I think he has helped with that. And his legacy really at Palace, it's not just all the goals he scored and the appearances, top appearance maker in the Premier League, top goal scorer. It's the fact that he has proven that as a younger player, you can stay at a team like Palace or go to a team like Palace, be paid pretty well. The TV money means that now we can pay these players way more than we used to. Be internationally recognised by your country, as Eze has recently. Elise is on the cusp of the France squad. And be recognised in the Premier League as a top player without having to maybe move on quite so quickly. I expect they both will eventually move on, and I think they'll both be fantastic. But I think in a way that's Wilf's legacy, that you can stay at Palace, and hopefully the young players coming through the academy, it's an indication to them that you don't have to stay 1 year at Palace. You can do 2, 3, 4 years, really become a quality Premier League player, then move on for 50, 60 million pounds. You get the move when you're ready. And Wilf moved to Man United at 20, clearly wasn't ready. And then Palace get the funds for it. So hopefully it all works out for us. But yeah, I mean, Elise signing that deal and not joining Chelsea was a real twist. We did not see that coming. The only person that knew about that, well, only two people, were Steve Parish and Michael Elise. So we all expected him to go to Chelsea. And that was a real coup for us. And I think a real nice moment that, yeah, we can hang on to these players. He will go at some point, probably to Chelsea or to Man City, maybe even in the summer. But, for us, an extra 5 minutes of these players is worth the entrance fee alone.
Yeah, and given Chelsea's problems, I sometimes do wonder if players are actually better off not being at Chelsea and staying at clubs where they've probably got a healthier environment, and I think that's maybe the case, even if it is for a year or two. I do agree that those players look destined to move to higher levels, but I absolutely think there is a value with the finances you have now to keep those players, to develop them, to get them to a stage where, just for their own careers, they're mature enough that they don't get lost in this like sea of chaos if you move to a Man United or Chelsea, that we see from so many players. So that's, I think, a relevant point. I want to sort of close up by talking about two players who Chelsea and Palace links. Let's start with Conor Gallagher. Because, of course, he had such a wonderful loan spell at Crystal Palace, and just watching him that season with awe, really, in terms of just seeing how he developed in other loans at Swansea and Charlton, obviously through the academy at Cobham, but then to see this player very much become this attacking midfielder, this goal-scoring midfielder for Palace. I mean, how... And it's quite relevant to Chelsea fans at the moment because we're very scared that Chelsea are going to do another stupid thing and try and sell him in January. How good was Conor Gallagher for you watching him as a Palace fan? I
did see those rumours of him leaving in January and my heart skipped a beat. I was like, no, come on, please, that'd be so good. It won't happen. I think he'll probably stay. He, as you say, he was a good example of the loan system really working for everyone involved because we had a fantastic season. He developed fantastically, and then Chelsea ended up getting a much better player as a result. And actually, yeah, we all wanted to and thought maybe had a chance, but clearly we never did. And seeing him go back to Chelsea and become captain actually makes us quite proud a little bit, to be honest, that we helped in some way. He was unbelievable for us. And Vieira was very clever in that he built the midfield around him that summer. And all the energy from our team all stemmed from him. He lifted other players around him. And it meant the likes of Eze could really find the space and develop as well. So even players like James MacArthur, who was in midfield with, who was in his 30s then, and people were thinking, oh, he'll get phased out. He became a better player from playing alongside Gallagher. He was a joy to watch. On a personal note, he was in my fantasy team, and I've rarely had the moments where you watch a player score a goal for your club in front of you and at the same time only fantasy points. That happened many times throughout the season, and that was beautiful. It hasn't happened since. He was great. Seemed like a lovely kid. Seemed to really blend into the team. Obviously, mates with Mark Gahey, so it was lovely watching them do all their bits to camera on the Palace TV. It felt like a really wholesome time to be a Palace fan, and he was part of that. And it's not the first time we've fallen in love with a lone player from a fellow London club. We had Ruben Loftus-Cheek a few years before, and we fell in love with him. He was fantastic. And obviously he's doing, again, good to see him doing well. I know it's not at Chelsea, I know it's at Milan, but it's nice to see, a British lad doing well abroad, and by all accounts he's doing very well. And even going back further, we had Ashley Cole on loan back in 99, even before he played for Arsenal. And even at 18, he was our best player in the Championship, and we fell in love with him again. And all these players, we thought, have we got a chance of getting them? If we tease them with a bid. I think back in 99 or 2000, we offered Arsenal £1 million at the end of that season, and they said, well, we'll hold off. And a year later, Barcelona offered £50 million, and they still turned that down. So we obviously had no chance, and we never did with Ruben or Connor as well. But again, that's, going back to what I was saying earlier, that's part of the role of clubs like Crystal Palace. And if we can help develop these players, we get a great season with a great Premier League quality player, and that helps us in general stay in the league, helps develop a player. And who knows, maybe down the line at some point Connor comes back when he's a bit older, we'd welcome him back with open arms. But yeah, he was, I can't overestimate or overstate, how good he was for us. And the same goes for Ruben Loftus-Cheek. They both joined us at the exact right time in their development, in our development as a club, and we really got to see the best of them, and I wish them both the best.
Yeah, I mean, Connor, other than Cole Palmer, Connor has been Chelsea's best player so far this season. And there is outrage, I'll tell you that, from Chelsea fans at the idea of letting him go, because, when we saw him on loan, I was like, they better not try and sell him the next summer, because you just saw the talent was there. And that's why the loan system, I think it would have been probably more gutting for a Palace fan if Connor had come back and then just be used as like a really fringe squad player that never gets time, and I think the fact that he's likely starting because Pochettino sees him as that key player, and he's got the captain's armband, it shows that development actually meant something. That loan actually meant something, rather than just being, he'll go there for a year and then we'll bring him back and we won't play him. So sorry to interrupt you, and I'm definitely keen to talk about Mark Gahey because I love him as well. But when the loan system's interesting, because when players go on loan and do well, really the odds of them signing are then going to be minimal, because the parent club's going to look at that and think, well, brilliant, we can either bring him back and play him, or we can sell him on to someone bigger for loads of money. You almost want your player to come on loan and be okay, but you can see a bit in there, and that's rare. And most of the time when that happens and the player doesn't flourish on loan, then parent club think, well, he's not worth it, and the other club thinks not worth keeping. So it's really tricky, really. You're rarely going to get a chance where a player shines on loan and then the other club gets to sign him. But yeah, it is what it is. I'm glad he's doing well. I'm really, really glad. In terms of Mark Gahey, I mean, this was a player at the time in that summer of 2021 that I was very disappointed Chelsea sold, because I'd watched him on loan at Swansea. I think he was one of the standout players in the Championship that year. And seeing how Chelsea's defence has had some problems in recent years, I look at Gahey and think what could have been really in terms of a real talent, and Chelsea having to spend more money on that position. In terms of him, because I think it was such a testament to Chelsea's academy, actually, that we have so many players who can just step into a Premier League defence and so easily and comfortably become a regular starter. It seemed like within weeks, Gahey was just like established at Crystal Palace, and that was it. I mean, was it a little bit surprising, or did you, when you signed Mark Gahey, did you expect, okay, you're buying a Chelsea academy player, there's clearly a good talent here?
I don't think anyone really ever expects a player to settle really quickly overnight, because it is the Premier League, and as we know, it's incredibly difficult. But you could tell straight away with him that he had quality. The biggest surprise, as you said, was that Chelsea let him go, to be honest, because he was Premier League quality the day he walked in the door with us. And not just that, but everything about him, his aura, the way he talks, the way he looks after himself, is a very mature young man. I think he was wearing the captain's armband quite quickly for us as well, and that wasn't a surprise either. He's got real captain's material. He just talks so well. Even recently, there was a game recently, I think it was one of the 0-0s against Forest or Fulham, and he came out after the game, and one of the reporters said, "Well, that was good defensive display," and he said, "No, I wasn't good enough. I could have done better." And you never hear players talking like that. It's really refreshing, actually. And again, that makes you think, yeah, there's an old head on young shoulders here, and it's unsurprising that I think he's vice captain at the moment to Joel Ward. Yeah, that was honestly very shocking that Chelsea let him go. Unsurprising that within about a year or so he's linked with a £60 million move back to Chelsea, which feels very Chelsea when it comes to recruitment. And he probably, I'd say, out of all the players we've discussed today, is probably most likely to leave, I think, in the summer, given that his profile has massively rocketed with those England performances, and almost seems to have got himself as a regular into Southgate's first choice 11, which I think is testament again to how good he is. He's loved at Palace. I think we knew, along with Eze and Elise, that he will be here for a short time and move on. Here for a good time, not a long time, I guess is probably a good way to describe these players. But we love him a lot. He's a great guy, a great player. And again, like the other two, a real privilege to watch him play. And I think actually alongside Anderson, there's a lot of Palace fans, and I think I include myself in that I think these two are probably our best ever centre-back partnership. So again, it might not be the most glamorous time at the moment with Roy Hodgson football, but we're lucky to be living through this time with some very, very good players in our team, and Gay is definitely one of them.
Absolutely. Just finally, about this specific game, Chelsea actually have been doing slightly better at Stamford Bridge in recent weeks compared to our awful track record at that ground over the past year. But the interesting tactical thing for me is Chelsea really struggle against low blocks, and we were able to get through it against Sheffield United because they didn't really have anything to offer in the final third, but we know Crystal Palace absolutely can, and as we saw against Man City, even when 2-0 down in the second half, there's still something to hurt a big team. What would you make of this game? Because this is not, it's not the Chelsea of like 10 years ago. This is much more of an even game, and maybe there's that confidence now that after recent results, Palace can do something at Stamford Bridge.
Yeah, I think the City result will have definitely helped with that. I mean, the biggest shock in the City result was that the first goal came from Jeffrey Schlupp to Mateta. Two players I don't think anyone would have thought would be involved in a goal at Man City. I think you're right. It'll be a low block. It'll be Jordan Ayew playing out wide for his defensive abilities. Elise probably on the other side, who has worked hard on defensive, but they'll be told to be a 4-5-1 going into a 4-3-3 in possession, and we will be looking to counter. Hopefully Edouard's back, because Mateta offers basically nothing, although Edouard doesn't seem to have much confidence, so better player, less confidence. If they could merge the two in some sort of the fly sort of machine, then you'd have a good decent striker. But if Eze starts, I think we'll be more confident in attack. I can't see it being high scoring. I think it'll be quite tight and quite nervy. I think it'll be one way or the other. I think someone like Cole Palmer will probably be the difference. He's been fantastic this season and is in my fantasy team, so that gives me a dilemma for the game morally. But if it was 1-1, if it was 2-1 Chelsea, I wouldn't be too surprised. I think we'll be in the game. Roy's tactics are always stay in the game as long as possible, and you never know, and that was borne out with the City result recently. So we rarely get turned over, and I don't expect us to be at Stamford Bridge, but I don't think we'll come out all guns blazing. I think, as you say, we'll be a low block, looking to hit on the counter, give it to Eze, give it to Elise, see what they can do, hope for a moment of magic, like Elise did away at Luton, and stay in the game. Although, having said that, it would inevitably be a Conor Gallagher last-minute winner or something. Yeah, of course it will. Like it was at Selhurst a couple of years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for taking the time to come on the show today. As I do with all my guests, just a chance for you to shout out where people can find your work and the podcast online.
Well, thank you very much, mate. It's been an absolute joy talking to you. So thank you very much. Yes, so I do the Palace podcast called 5 Year Plan, or FYP Podcast. If you Google that, you'll find it on all the platforms. And then I also do comedy football bits, songs and skits and sketches at Jim Daly Comedy on any platform as well. So do check that out if you need a little bit of a light relief, which I know Chelsea fans maybe do sometimes. So there you go.
We at the current time we're looking for all the joy we can get, mate. So absolutely. Thank you so much for watching, for listening. You can follow me across socials at SonOfChelsea, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.